Today, we're going to learn all about setting up waypoint missions in iNav. You know, the ability to have your aircraft just fly somewhere without you being at the controls has so much power and so much potential, and so many people are not taking advantage of it because, frankly, the way that iNav's waypoint configuration works is really confusing and unintuitive in a lot of ways. It's not quite as powerful as something like Mission Planner and ArduPilot, but it is really powerful and really capable if you just know how to use it. And after you watch this video, you will know how to use it. I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. Let's start with the prerequisites. We are going to be working in iNav 9.0. If you've got a previous version of iNav, at least back to 7.0, in my experience, most of the things I'm going to say will still apply. Not much has changed in the waypoint configuration between iNav 7, 8, and 9, although something might have changed. So if you're on an earlier version and something that I show you here doesn't quite add up, maybe it's because of that. We are going to be working with this vehicle here. This is an airplane, as you can tell. The things that you do in iNav Configurator are a little bit different depending on if you're doing an airplane versus a multi-rotor. Specifically, like a multi-rotor, if the aircraft is at 100 feet and I tell it to go to 500 feet, it can just like go straight up to 500 feet, whereas an airplane can't go straight up. So specifically, like around sharp turns, like a multi-rotor can hit a waypoint, turn, and then just go the different direction. An airplane is going to like have to fly through it. So there's a little bit of differences in the way that the vehicle actually implements the flight track, but the actual way that you set it up is the same whether you're using a multi-rotor or a fixed wing. We are, however, at least in this video, going to be talking about a fixed wing. And you're going to need an iNav vehicle with a GPS. You got to have a GPS. It's better if you also have a compass, but at the very least, you need a GPS. So with those prerequisites out of the way, let's start talking about setting up an iNav waypoint mission. And we do that here in the Mission Control tab. And the first thing that's frustrating about the Mission Control tab is that it doesn't give you an easy way of jumping from one location to another. So like in Google Maps, I could just type an address in or a GPS coordinate and it would jump to that point. It doesn't work that way here in iNav's Mission Control. So if you have an aircraft and it has a GPS lock, it will show you on the map where the aircraft currently is. But if you just want to go to some arbitrary location, you're kind of out of luck. You just have to like basically scroll to that location. Well, there is a shortcut. I'll show it to you. Let's say that I am going to set up a waypoint mission around this airport. And I'm picking an airport. You shouldn't fly around airports, right? That goes without saying. I'm picking an airport because we are going to be testing out this waypoint stuff in a simulator. And the simulator that I've got, it's made for real airplanes. And so like you can select an airport as your starting location. It's actually really difficult in the simulator to choose a starting location that isn't an existing airport. So to make things simple, we're going to do that here. And we'll choose McGee-Tyson Airport near my hometown of Knoxville. And I can get this GPS coordinate. It'd be nice if I could copy it, couldn't I? But I don't. Oh, there we go. Copy to clipboard. Fantastic. So I've got the GPS coordinates copied in. What I'm then going to do is just anywhere here on this map in Mission Control, I'm going to click and I'm going to add a waypoint. And then if I click on that waypoint, I can enter the latitude and longitude. And in fact, I wonder if I just hit Control V. No, it does not. It just pastes in 35.8. Where's the rest of it? There it is. Okay, well, I got the first half. Control X, that's way too many decimal points. Control V for the longitude. And, oh, no, that comma's got to go. Okay, there we go. Is that valid? Is that a waypoint? How about that? There we go. Okay, so we put the latitude and the longitude in, and we get a waypoint, and then that waypoint, aha, is right in the given location. It's really easy for me to zoom in on that waypoint. So we've set a waypoint, and obviously when we set up a mission, it's going to involve a bunch of waypoints. Let's look at the available options for those waypoints. Obviously we have the latitude and longitude, and I can set those manually. If I have a specific location that I want the aircraft to go, I can set it manually, or I can just click and drag it around. So for example, let's say I want to do a nice little flight around the river here. So here's waypoint number 1, and then I can click and add waypoint number 2, and I can click and add waypoint number 3 and waypoint number 4. We do a nice little flight around the river. Okay, so we've got the location of our 4 waypoints set. The next thing we need to do is set the altitude, right? We don't want the aircraft flying into the ground or flying into the trees. We want to know how high the aircraft is going to be in the air at the time that it goes to this waypoint. And this is one of the most confusing things about setting up waypoints in iNav, because the altitude is, well, like, how simple could it be? The altitude is right here, 50 meters. But 50 meters above what? Because if you look here at the ground distance is going to show you the distance between the aircraft and the ground, and you see here it says no home. Here's what that means. The elevation that you see here is the elevation of the ground above sea level at that location. So this is 248 meters above sea level. The aircraft, then you would think that this 50 meters would be 50 meters above the ground. So 248 meters above sea level, it would be at 298 meters. That is not how it works. And that is a thing you need to, it's so obvious that that's how it should work, but that is not how it works. The way that iNav handles elevation is that this 50 meter elevation is above the takeoff location, which is really stupid. Because what that means is that if I go up to the very, very tippy top of a mountain, and this waypoint says 50 meters, and I launch the plane, then when it hits this waypoint, it'll be 50 meters above the top of that mountain. And if I go way down deep into a valley and I launch the plane and it flies to this same location, it'll be 50 meters above the altitude I was at when I launched. It's so dumb that the altitude of a waypoint changes depending on what altitude I'm at when I launch it. If I say I want you to go to point A and be at altitude 300 meters, then just be at 300 meters. If I say I want you to be 50 meters above the ground, be 50 meters above the ground. What do you care what altitude I was at when I launched the damn thing? I don't know, but that's how it works. It's stupid and counterintuitive, and I can't think of a reason why they did it this way, but that's how they did it. So here's how we work around it. The way that iNav intends you to work around it is that you will pick a takeoff location. And so what you'll do is you will hit I can't figure out where to get this takeoff location. The only way I can get it to show up is to hit right here, MP elevation, and that brings up this dialog, the takeoff home. And then what I do is I hit this crosshair here, and it puts the takeoff location at the center of the screen. And then I can drag it. So I'm going to take off from this little Keller Bend Park. I'm going to take off from Keller Bend Park right here. And now, when I click on a waypoint, the altitude is shown. It's going to be 50 meters above what? Above this altitude here for this home point, which is at 271 meters elevation above sea level. And so 271 meters is my takeoff location, plus 50 meters above that for my altitude at my waypoint is 321 meters. The waypoint is at an elevation of 248 above sea level, so 321 minus 248 is 73, and there you go, it matches. We'll be 73 meters above the ground when we hit that waypoint. If I move that takeoff location to another altitude, I'm just going to assume this is a different altitude here, and then I have to click away and click back, and that will put me 140 meters above the ground at this waypoint. Basically, the only reason you would ever use this would be if you knew for a fact that you were actually going to launch the aircraft from this location, because if you do it this way, and then you launch the aircraft from anywhere else, the altitude at the waypoints will be higher or lower, depending on if the location you launch from is higher or lower. So basically, this altitude is useless unless you do sea level reference. If you enable the sea level reference, then all of the altitudes are relative to sea level. And so what you have to do is you have to say the elevation at this waypoint is 240 meters above sea level. How high above that do I want to be? Let's say I want to be 30 meters above the ground. Okay, 248 plus 30 is 278. And now the altitude is in centimeters, so that's actually 2.78 meters. So we'll just add 2 zeros, 278 meters. And now the height above ground is 30 meters, which iNav doesn't like. iNav wants you to be at least 50 meters above the ground. Okay, fine, 298 meters. And now, boom, we are 50 meters above the ground, and we will basically always do sea level reference. You always want to do sea level reference because otherwise, the altitude the aircraft will be at when it hits the waypoint depends on the altitude you were at when you took off, and usually that's not what you want. Maybe it is what you want. If it is, that's how you could do it, but it doesn't make sense to me. So we're going to go through now, and we're going to set the altitude for each of these waypoints. We're going to change it to sea level reference, elevation 248 meters, and we're going to go 298 meters. Good. We're 50 meters above the ground. Fantastic. For waypoint 3, I need to turn on sea level reference, 298 meters. Good, perfect. And for waypoint 4, sea level reference, 200. That's not actually very interesting. Well, let's do some changes in altitude, because here's the next thing we want to check. Once you've got your waypoint mission planned out, the next thing you want to do is you want to hit this terrain map here. And you do need a takeoff home location for the terrain map. You have to have it. You can't do, like, even though all of these waypoints are sea level reference, you cannot do what I'm about to show you unless you have a takeoff location. So just put that takeoff location somewhere. It doesn't really matter where, because all of your waypoints are sea level reference, so they're going to ignore it anyway. But we're going to hit this mountain here. We're going to set the takeoff home, and then we're going to scroll down, and it's going to show us the elevation profile. What the elevation profile is it shows you for this whole track whether you are going to impact the terrain or not. So what we can see is that here's waypoint 1, and then as we fly here, we go across this terrain, and the terrain comes up in altitude, and we're going to crash into the ground. We don't want that. We need to add some more waypoints. So what I'll do is I'll come over here and I'll click right there, and it'll add another waypoint. By the way, this is something that iNav 9 added. I don't think previous versions could do this. I don't think they did. I could be wrong. The ability to add a waypoint in the middle of a mission. It used to be that wherever you clicked, it would just add a new waypoint at the end of the mission. Here, if you click on the line, it adds a waypoint in the middle of the mission. So let's add waypoint 2. And if we take a look here at the terrain, this little peak here is at about 316 meters. Okay, so 316 plus 50 meters above that would be 366. And so here, let's set waypoint 2, sea level reference, 366.00. And now we will be 118 meters above the ground. But most importantly, we will be 50 meters above this peak right here. And likewise, we'll add another one on the other. Oh, see, I didn't click on the line. We'll add another one on the other end, and we will also do that at sea level reference 366.00. And then we can see that the terrain now, we're going to fly over it. We'll come down here. Here we're at about 300 meters, and this is 279 meters, so we are only about 20 meters above the ground here. Well, maybe we're okay with that, maybe we're not. Let's go ahead and take waypoint 4. Let's make that a little higher, so through 298, we'll go to, say, 320 meters. Great. And then here we want to be at, let's see, what do we got over here? 325, 334, 384, let's say. That way we'll be above that one, 384. And let's see, let's stay over the river here so we don't, let's try to stay over the river there. Yeah, okay. So let's see, this is waypoint 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, we'll say 300, and that's fine. That's a fine altitude. That one is fine too. Mission altitude 320. We're well above the ground there. We'll bring number 4 back down to 298 meters. Okay, fine. And then mission 5. And then let's do a 6th one. We'll add a 6th one. And let's see, where does the ground get high? Ooh, okay. There we go. Let's set that to 322 meters plus 50 is going to be 372. So we'll do sea level reference, 37200. And now we'll clear that peak, and then we'll come back down again for the 7th one. Let's just add another one wherever this is, roughly. There we go, right about there. And that is going to be 307. So we'll set that one. Again, sea level reference, 307 is going to be 35700 to be 50 meters above the terrain. Perfect. Okay, that's a nice little mission that we've got there. We've got some waypoints set, and we've checked the altitude to verify that we should have sufficient clearance above the terrain at every point in the flight path. Let's go ahead and load this into the flight controller and simulate flying this, and then we will come back and we'll take a look at some of the tweaks and things we can do to dress it up a little bit. How do you save it to the flight controller? There's 2 ways that you can save it to the flight controller and 1 way that you can save it to your hard drive. I highly recommend that you do this. The first thing we can do is we can hit Save Mission File, and we can save this to the hard drive. Highly recommend, because you could load this same mission on multiple aircraft potentially, or you could just crash and lose your flight controller and not want to have to go through all this mess again. Here's the next thing you can do, is you can save it to the flight controller. And there's 2 choices. One is Save Mission to FC, and the other is Save Mission to EEPROM. I don't know why that tooltip is not popping up there. Save EEPROM mission. There it is. Here's the difference between them. If I save mission to FC, the mission is loaded into the flight controller, but as soon as I power cycle the flight controller, the mission is gone. Okay, most of the time as a hobbyist, you're not going to want to do that. What you're going to do is save mission to EEPROM. And when you save mission to EEPROM, it is stored in non-volatile memory and it's preserved over the course of power cycles, which is probably what you're going to want to do. So I'll do save to EEPROM, and then I get mission valid, and the mission is in the flight controller. And wait, there's more. In order to show you how to load the mission, we're going to go into the simulator, and I've got something set up called Hardware in the Loop. Which basically means that this flight controller down on the floor here is actually going to be operating inside the simulator. I've got a whole video set on how to set that up if you want to try it out. It's really great for exactly this kind of thing where we're going to test autonomous flight and we just don't know what the aircraft is going to do, potentially. Or maybe we're going to have it do something where we want to plan a route, but we wouldn't want to do that in real life because it wouldn't be legal or safe. I'm not going to show you how to set that up. I'll put a link to that video down in the video description below. But I'm going to go ahead and start this flight. So here's the aircraft. It is powered up. It's ready to fly. But if I take off and I try to activate waypoint mode right now, nothing will happen because the waypoint mission is not loaded. In order to load the waypoint mission, what I'm going to do is throttle down center, so just basically throttle down, and right stick up right. And it will say, well, what it actually says is unable to arm first waypoint too far. Let's talk about that in a minute, but basically now I have loaded in that waypoint mission, and then if I then activate waypoint nav mode, it will fly that mission. The other way that you can load a mission is to go to advanced tuning, and then if you scroll down to the general navigation settings, load waypoints on boot is an option. Load waypoints on boot means that as soon as the aircraft powers up, it'll immediately load the mission and be ready to go. And this is usually what I do for aircraft where I'm going to be flying waypoint missions, because it just saves me having to put that stick command in. The main reason that you might not want to load waypoints on boot is that if you have a waypoint mission loaded and you are too far from the first waypoint, iNav will not let you arm. This is intended to keep you safe. Let's say you've been working on a mission and the mission is 100 miles from your house, and you load that mission in by accident, and then you take off and you activate waypoint mode, and it just flies 100 miles away, or more likely runs out of battery and crashes. The idea is that if you're not at least close to your first waypoint, you not only can you not activate waypoint mode, you literally cannot fly the aircraft at all. So one way around this is to always make sure you put your first waypoint within a certain distance of your expected takeoff location. How far is that distance? That's controlled by this setting here, the waypoint safe distance, and it defaults, I believe this is the default, to 500 meters. There's another way around this though. The first way around it is that you can increase the waypoint safe distance, and you can set that up to, I don't even know what the maximum is. The maximum is 1500 meters. Oh, but wait. If you just set that to 0, it completely disables that and lets you arm no matter how far you are from that first waypoint. That's actually the thing to do. If you want to keep that safety precaution in place, you can set that to between 500 and 1500 meters and always make sure you're within that distance of your first waypoint. But you don't always know where you're going to take off from. Maybe the mission's over there and you're over here, and you're going to take off and you're going to fly over there, and then you're going to activate the mission. So normally I would disable this. The other thing you could do is you could turn load waypoints on boot off and only load the mission if you knew you were within a certain distance of the first waypoint, and then not load the mission and just fly manually the rest of the time. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to do load waypoints on boot, and I'm going to disable the waypoint safe mission so I can arm no matter how far I am from that first waypoint. Okay, and now you see when the flight controller first starts up, it will just say mission loaded. That first mission is loaded. I'm going to fly roughly in the direction of that first. You know what? Actually, no. I can just activate waypoint mode. Boom. And we'll go to that first waypoint. Here we go. We're going to that first waypoint. We're 4 kilometers away. While we're going to that waypoint, I want you to take a look at this view. This is the map view. This is something that the simulator does. And I can do plugins, map, download waypoints from flight controller, and then we can actually see here we got the waypoints that are set. So I can actually see the aircraft flying to that first waypoint, and I can see how it's going to interact with it, which will be something interesting as we get a little deeper into this. And we'll hit that first waypoint, and now we are headed to the second waypoint. Now, I want you to notice a couple things that we're going to talk about as we get deeper into this topic. First of all, did you notice that it overflew that first waypoint and now it's turned back to the second waypoint? It didn't turn and get online, right? And in fact, it's going to have trouble hitting that second waypoint because it can only bank so steeply. We're almost going to miss it. We did climb to that higher altitude, though. That's good. And now we've overshot that second waypoint and we're turning back to hit the first waypoint. We're barely online. So there's settings we can configure to control how the aircraft will interact with the waypoints. But by default, all it's going to try to do is it's just going to fly straight at that waypoint, and it's going to hit it and overshoot it and then turn toward the next one. And that means that the track that we created isn't necessarily the exact track that the aircraft is going to fly. Especially at the beginning of the mission, where it may approach the first waypoint from a different angle and not be online to go to the second waypoint. Do you also see that the aircraft isn't doing a sharp turn back to get on track and then fly straight at the waypoint? It's just turned and now it's aimed at the waypoint and it's going to hit it. It doesn't really care that it's not actually over the track that we laid out. This is also something that you can configure, and we're going to get into it in this series. Oh, I know why this altitude is screwed up. That's the altitude above takeoff location. That's how iNav handles altitude. I should be looking at the altitude from the flight simulator. I don't know how to do that. But yeah, that number doesn't mean anything. That's just the altitude above takeoff location. It's irrelevant. And what's going to happen when we reach the end of the mission? Well, we don't want to just fly off into the sunset. You might not be paying attention. So when we hit the end of the mission, when we hit that last waypoint, the aircraft will go into loiter mode at its current altitude. And we'll just let that happen for the sake of example. Well, it's not on the map, but it is in the flight controller, thank goodness, and the flight controller will now enter a circle and loiter around that point until you take control again. But you need to know that the elevation that iNav shows here is sometimes not very accurate. I think that the reason for that, like, it's not that it just has bad data, it's just pulling this data from a publicly available source. But I think when you have an elevation graph, the size of the grid squares can vary. Okay, so basically we've got an elevation graph which is very low resolution. If I have a 1 square mile of terrain, and somewhere in that terrain we're at 300 meters, and somewhere in that terrain we're at 275 meters, okay, that whole square mile is just going to be marked as the average of the highest and the lowest point within that grid. And so, like, sometimes you're going to be off by as much as 12.5 meters. Okay, so I've found situations where when I go based off the elevation shown here, it can be off by, well, it just depends on the terrain, but it can be off by sometimes a significant amount. If you really care about that, I'm going to recommend that you go to Google Earth and you double check your elevations by clicking on a point. You do right click and you do get info. I have to assume that Google Earth has more high resolution data than whatever iNav's pulling from, and you can just cross-check those elevation points. It's just a little note. If you ever get really concerned with elevation, you need to, if you're 100 meters in the air, then it probably doesn't matter. But if you're ever trying to do some kind of autonomous flying where you're a little bit closer to the ground, then you might want to double check the elevation that iNav is showing you. So to recap, the steps of creating a iNav waypoint mission. Number 1, put your first waypoint in, manually type in the lat long in order to get the map to the location that you're working with, or have the aircraft powered up, have a GPS with lock on the aircraft, and then it will automatically just show you where the aircraft currently is. Once you've got yourself in the general area that you're working with, add the waypoints. Manually set the altitude for each of the waypoints using sea level reference always for every single one. Don't forget to turn it on either, because you'll just go click, 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 and you'll overlook one, and it will be relative to your takeoff position, and that is just effed up. That's not what you want. So we'll do sea level reference. We manually add whatever separation we want to the elevation to put in the sea level elevation, including 2 extra zeros because this is in centimeters. And then we double check, right? We double check by hitting the mountain here. We set a takeoff home somewhere. And we scroll down to the elevation profile and we double check. Where's the elevation profile? This is stupid. It sometimes doesn't load. That's dumb. Come on, elevation profile. Oh my God. Why is the elevation profile not loading? Elevation profile. I need a takeoff home. Set my takeoff home. Drag it to somewhere plausible I might take off from. And it's not loading. It does this sometimes. I don't know why it's not loading. I don't know. We close and restart. And, oh, there it is. There's my elevation profile. We double check that we have clearance above the terrain. However, as we saw, there are going to be times when you're going to blow out a turn. And so just because it checks out here doesn't necessarily mean that you're good to go. Ideally, if you were really concerned, you would then come into a simulator and you would double check something like this to even further double check it. Or maybe you just go out and run it, and while you're running it, you just keep your finger on the switch to take it out and put it back into manual mode if anything seems like it's about to go wrong. There is a lot more to this. A lot more. And we're going to go into it in future videos in this series. I hope that you will there's a playlist. I'm going to make a playlist out of this. It's in the video description below, and I hope you'll be back for those. And I hope that you will get so much out of them that you'll consider joining my Patreon. If you value this content, I still got to pay bills. I love making it. I would do it for free, but I also still have bills to pay. And so if you get a lot of value out of it, then please consider joining my Patreon. Link in the video description below. I'll talk about it more as we get further into the playlist, and hopefully you become more and more convinced that this content is worth your time. See you there. Card on screen, link down below to the playlist.